Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noise of the sea, and the rushing of nations, that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, like a wheel before the whirlwind. And behold, even time and trouble, and before the morning he is not.
Hello, good morning, welcome to... boy, I didn't start recording it. Hello, good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing, this is for the sake of the fact that I didn't record the intro. There we go, that's what the study is, Paul, part 56. Okay. My archive will not have I'll have to download that. Alright, so we're continuing in Genesis 43. I forgot to unmute myself somehow. Actually, what I did is I muted the computer and left myself muted. Alright. So, Joseph has encountered his brothers down in Egypt after being elevated to his position as second to Pharaoh. They came before him. He accused them of being spies and required them to demonstrate their truthfulness by bringing forth their brother Benjamin that they had told him about upon his inquiry. And they go back to Jacob, of course, last chapter, and Jacob is none too pleased at this and is pretty much it's a non-starter. But then he pretty much, whatever. I did a better job summarizing it. I'm summarizing it twice. I'm sort of getting anxious to get moving. So, hopefully we all remember where we are, right? Jacob is not inclined at all to send Benjamin down and has left Simeon to be where he is. Let's continue with chapter 43. And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of the land of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. And Judah said unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, You shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether ye had yet another brother? Why do I keep throwing extra words in? Whether ye had yet a brother. And they said, The man asked us straitly of our state, and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words. Could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live, and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned the second time. And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits of the land in your vessels, and carry down this man a present, a little balm, and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. And take double money in your hand. The money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise. Go again unto the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother, and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. And the men took the present, and they took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt, and stood before Joseph. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of the house, "Bring these men home and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon." And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men were afraid, because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, "Because of the money that was returned in our sacks, at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall upon us, and take us for bondmen and our asses." And they came near the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, "O sir, we came indeed down the first time to buy food. And it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. And other money we have brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put our money in our sacks." And he said, "Peace be unto you. Fear not. Your God and the God of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. And he brought Simeon out unto them. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph, and they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. That sentence doesn't, I'm like baffled at that one. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. I'm guessing that we're going to look into that, because that's not proper English, all right? For they heard that they should eat bread there. I just can't stop reading that without, it just makes my brain freeze for a second. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spake, is he yet alive?" And they answered, "Thy servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive." And they bowed down their heads, and made obeisance. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me?" And he said, "God be gracious to thee, my son." And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself, and said, "Set on bread." And they set on for himself by himself, for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Hebrews. To the Egyptians. I'm sorry, I'm so used to the Hebrews being so very picky. The Egyptians don't eat with those dirty, bearded Hebrews. It's true, because the Egyptians all shaved, right? Clean shaven. That's a mark of civilization. Sorry. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. I must feel like we're going to get through that chapter, so we're going to do chapter 44. We're going to read it right now. And he commanded the steward of the house, saying, "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money." And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. And when they were gone out of the city, and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, "Up, follow after the men, and when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, Wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? Is not this it in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby indeed he divineth? Ye have done evil in so doing." And he overtook them. And he spake unto them these same words. And they said unto him, "Wherefore said my Lord these words? God forbid that thy servants should do according to this thing. Behold, the money which we found in our sacks' mouths, we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of thy Lord's house silver and gold? With whomsoever of thy servants it be found, both let him die, and we also will be my Lord's bondmen. And he said, Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my servant, and ye shall be blameless. And they speedily took down every man his sack to the ground, and opened every man his sack. And he searched and began at the eldest, and left at the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they rent their clothes, and laded every man his ass, and returned to the city. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there. And they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, What deed is this that ye have done? Watch ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? And Judah said, What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. And he said, God forbid that I should do so. No, and he said, Joseph, God forbid that I should do so. But the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. Then Judah came near unto him and said, O my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. And let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. My Lord asked his servants, saying, Have ye a father or a brother? And we said unto my Lord, We have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one. And his brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother. And his father loveth him. And thou saidst unto thy servants, Bring him down unto me, that I might set my eyes upon him. And we said unto my Lord, The lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. As thou saidst unto thy servants, Except your youngest brother come down with you, you shall see my face no more. And it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant my father, we told him the words of my Lord, and our father said, Go again and buy us a little food. And we said, We cannot go down. If our youngest brother be with us, then we will go down. For we may not see the man's face, except our youngest brother be with us. And thy servant my father said unto us, You know that my wife bare me 2 sons. And the one went out from me. And I said, Surely he is torn in pieces. And I saw him not since. But if you take this also from me, and mischief befalls him, ye shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to thy servant my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life, it shall come to pass, when he seeth that the lad is not with us, that he will die. And thy servants shall bring down the gray hairs of thy servant our father with sorrow to the grave. For thy servant became surety for the lad unto my father, saying, If I bring him not to thee, then I shall bear the blame to my father forever. Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father? Okay, and then that's the moment when he makes himself known. We're not going to go into that today, I don't think. It's quite enough. I don't even know if the only reason is because it's a straight narrative, and I feel like we can move through this. So they've eaten up the corn in verse 2, and Jacob sends them. Judah again says, Hey, the man said, he solemnly said, You will not see my face except your brother be with you. So If you'll send him, we'll go. If you will not send him, we won't go. This gets repeated in the next chapter. For he said, and repeating, he will not see my face. And then Israel, Jacob is annoyed that they even told him. Why'd you even tell him that you had a brother? Why'd you do that? Why'd you deal so badly? Why'd you deal so ill with me? It's true. Sometimes volunteering information is dangerous. I gotta say, this is not exactly off topic, but it's on topic. Volunteering information. Resist it. Remember, a lot of people have no right to your information. I mean, even like family members. And, just like a long time ago, I told my wife, I'm like, look, if there's a family event and people want us to come, we never, ever provide an excuse as to why we're not coming. And because a long time ago, I realized that when you provide an excuse for something, you basically tell people what they have to do to get you to do what they want. Meaning, if you say like, well, I can't come because I don't have a car. Well, I'll send someone to pick you up. There's always a way around. Your excuse can be circumvented. Whereas if you say, I'm not coming, it's just a decision I made, there's nothing to say. There's nothing to work with there. Except, you don't have to say it's just a decision. Oh, we're not going to make it. And then offer nothing more. For me, someone who is, who likes to talk and I don't know if I like to talk, who talks, because I could say, let's say inclined to speak would be a better way to say it. I can't say that I like it per se. There's many times when I've regretted speaking. In fact, of all my regrets in life, I would say the majority of them, more than half certainly, are things I've said. I'm thankful for that in a sense because, the things you say, every idle word you will give account in the judgment, but the reason Jesus says that is because he's trying to tell you even the least things. So even though we shall give account of every idle word, that doesn't mean every idle word is at the same level as every intentional action. There's a lot of distance between intentional action and idle words. You know what I mean? And Jesus' point in that is just saying, hey, you got to give account for everything, down to the very least. And that's something we must accept. That's how we understand. That's how Christians who are raised in godly families can still understand themselves to be sinners. Because though they may not have all the actions, you can look into your heart and see the evil that dwells there. If you can't, then you need to look a little harder. Oh, I've got nothing in my heart. It's like, well, really? Okay. I don't believe you. Even amidst all my good intentions, I have good intentions, most people, a lot of people do. Like I've said many times, good intentions are no excuse. You still have to take responsibility for the consequences of what you do. You can't just, I intended well. I didn't mean for bad things to happen. I was just trying to help you. Well, own it and fix it. Or whatever. We've got to be, accountable for what we've worked. And not necessarily, I don't mean accountable to the judgment because the Lord Jesus has caused us to pass from death to life. But we acknowledge that passage includes forgiveness for even the most minute sins. Yes, the great sins. We are forgiven of our great and terrible sins, but also of the little ones. Anyways, it's a lot of topic. This is more, what I was saying before is more on topic, that you don't have to volunteer all the information. And that's a good lesson to take from here. Yes, they were, because they said that we answered him according to the tenor of these words. That seems like a very modern expression. I was surprised to see that. Tenor. I'm curious what that word is in the Hebrew. Let's see, tenor. Is it on the screen? Am I too wide? There we go, tenor. So what is tenor? So it's probably some sort of, obviously this is a bit of a figure of speech. According to his mouth, it's a figure of speech. We use the word tenor, meaning, well, the way it sounded. The way his mouth was moving, so to speak. Meaning, as the words came from his mouth, there didn't seem to be anything sinister about the question. It seemed like a perfectly natural question when you're trying to figure out who people are. They weren't like, hi, we've got an extra brother. We've got, they weren't volunteering information, which is even worse, right? I gotta do something about that little light. They weren't volunteering information, but when asked, they replied because the words did not seem to be amiss. There was nothing sinister about it. It seemed, it's the kind of thing people would, especially at those times, they'd ask about, your family, your history, who, your relations are. If where I live now, if I had the right name, like as I noticed this happening with people who are from around here, if you give your name, all of a sudden people are like, oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, do you know so-and-so? Because they recognize the families you're part of. And there may be connections there because it's a smaller place. I really want that light to be done. In fact, I can do it so fast. I'm capable of doing this. I've got all the tools at hand. I'm going to fix it. Because it's just shining my eyes, and it's just too annoying, even in the middle of the Bible study. Just 1 second here. I'm going to keep talking. So, again, the simple lesson is, I don't know that I'm not going to second guess what they did, because like they said, a lot of times we answer because of the way, people say, well, why can't you come? Why can't you be there? What's the matter? What is the thing? What's wrong? And then what happens is, you didn't want to go somewhere, and so and that's another thing. Like when you use excuses, what if it's a BS excuse? So don't use BS excuses, and don't use meaning all of a sudden they call you out on your excuse. It can be embarrassing. Oh, I try not to make excuses. I am master of my own house, and I make my own decisions. If I won't be in attendance, I won't be in attendance. And if someone asks me why, I have the right to either tell them or not tell them. I don't have to say why. It's like, well, there's just some personal reasons. And I thought, well, what person? It's personal. That's why I use the word personal, because it's not for public consumption or even family consumption. It's personal to me. Anyways, learn to be assertive in the face of authorities and of family members. Now, they wanted to be polite. I'm not saying, in certain situations, you don't have much of a choice. I don't think Jacob is particularly justified in his criticism of them in this. But there are times when you will do yourself and others no favors by being too free with free with your words. Don't be too free with your words. Remember, words are powerful. By your words, you're going to be judged, and also justified, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And, it's not just the lies we tell. If it's a lie, it's a lie. It's not just the words you say. It's what those words represent. Do they represent the truth? Do they represent lies? It's not just the plain meaning of the words that come out of your mouth that you're judged on. God forbid that, because then liars would make it beautiful for themselves. But no, by the actual content, by the true nature of what you have said. Now, again, I think they're justified. I think they've got a reasonable argument. How could we know he would say, bring him down? They were so shocked by the accusation of being spies, because it was the furthest thing from their mind that they would be spies. For who? Dad? So they never suspect that. That's why Joseph really catches them flat-footed. They have no answer. We're true men. We're the sons of one father, and we have a brother, and all this stuff. They give all this information to sort of like, because again, it's like me. If people tried to say something about me, like they were like, oh, Paul Strangini, he's he works for the government. He's doing their bidding or something like that, right? Like some sort of agent provocateur or I don't know what, right? If they were to say, like, let's say at some point in the future, I were to be doing something and people were saying, oh, but I have a history. I've lived in the same house for years. You know, my whereabouts are known. There's certain things I can't be part of from what the life I've lived. You know, I'm not the spy for some foreign government. I'm not the, you know, I mean, I can't be certain things because there's just no record of that in my life. You have to, you have to participate. And the things I've been doing are the things I've been doing, not other things. Okay. All right. So, could we know? No, I don't think they could know. And so Judah takes the lead here. It's not Reuben this time, it's Judah. Judah does have a leading role in the Genesis, which is interesting. Because like I said, it becomes the leading tribe. Judah is that fourth son. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Of Leah's children. Judah the youngest. Of course, Dinah was born after. She's the youngest, actually, of Leah's. Wait, no, she had, of course. Then there was a handmaiden, and then there was the last two that were also Leah. So not the young, of the first cluster of the four brothers. I will be surety for him. Meaning, I will, to be surety is like when someone gives a loan, it's like co-signing. Not exactly like co-signing, but it means you will be responsible. You know, it's like saying, I will assure you that the debt was paid. And how so? Well, because usually it would be surety for someone else. Let's say someone wants to borrow money. They don't have good credit, but let's say I do. Then I could step in and be surety for them and basically say, hey, listen, I'm willing to pledge for this person. And that means that if they don't pay, I will. So, and on that basis, oftentimes you can make things happen because the person who is surety is assumed to be able to be accountable. So, more so than the one who maybe needs someone to stand up for them. So, what he's saying is, I will assure you that you will receive Benjamin. And he's sort of binding himself, it's not exactly a curse, but what he's saying is, this is essentially the form of a curse. If I bring him not to thee and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. And then that's like a standard conditional curse. If I do not do this thing, then let these consequences happen to me. I do not suggest making these things any more than I suggest making oaths, as Jesus said. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. There's a lot of proverbs that say, don't be surety for a friend. You will smart for it. A lot of people people with bad credit tend to have bad credit for a reason. And this is not so much credit, but oftentimes that's how it comes up, I should say. It's like, because this is more about having his son returned, not so much a sum of money. Because what can Judah really do if he can't return Benjamin? He's going to bear the blame forever, but that was going to happen. Well, I guess he's saying me personally. What he's saying is, he's indicating his willingness, I should say, to go and do the extra work to make sure we bring Benjamin home. And he's putting himself out there that let the blame, if this doesn't happen, fall on me, because I am assuring you, I will bring him home. You can require him of my hand. Now, Judah, I think, is probably, though he had that marriage incident, he seems always to be a pretty reliable guy. Well, at least compared to Simeon, And in fact, it says so in Jacob's blessing, he says, out of the scepter comes Judah. The scepter comes from Judah. Because he knew that there was something, I guess, royal in the line of Judah. For except we had lingered, surely, we were saying, if we hadn't, we're lingering. We'd already be back with the grain. So, and because he's figuring we're not, because this is a sort of optimistic thing. He's saying we'd be back already. It'd be fine. We didn't really steal anything. We aren't really spies, and we really have a brother. If we bring him, everything should be okay. because he doesn't, of course, know Joseph's ulterior motives. He says, well, if it must be so now, do it. And then he recommends they take a gift, a present, a little balm, a little honey, a little gift basket, basically, and take double your money. Money that was brought again in the mouth, just carry it again. Maybe it was maybe they just, something, an oversight. They left the money in the bag or something. Was that where it was? No, they put it back in the bag. It's not like they were in the habit of keeping the money in the bag, but it was just something weird that they didn't understand. And Jacob said it was some oversight or something. Doesn't seem plausible to me, right? But what plausible explanations do you have? This is some sort. It's so hard to believe this is some sort of conspiracy, because that's what it is. It's a conspiracy of one. But there's something going on behind the scenes that they don't understand. They're being treated like this because of what happened with Joseph. They're being manipulated like this because of what happened with Joseph. And this they begin to realize, of course, in chapter 44. And he calls on God to give them mercy before the man. Take your brother, go. That you can get back Simeon. That he may send away your other brother and Benjamin. And he says, if I be bereaved of my children, I be bereaved. I am bereaved. That's kind of a fatalistic statement. But it's true. Hey, that's life. What if I'm bereaved of my children, I lose my children? Then I'm bereaved. What am I going to say? The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. He doesn't start cursing God, like Job's wife. Curse God and die. What's wrong with you? The Lord took away all your blessings. Don't you think it's time to curse him and die? No, if I be bereaved, I am bereaved. That sounds like something Job would say. It does. Because naked came I into the world, naked I go out. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He gave me children, and then he takes away my children. What shall I say? He would say what he said before. I am not worthy of thy mercy, and of all thy gifts. He knew about God's mercy, and he knew he was not worthy of it, nor of the gifts of God. So sometimes, though it's sorrowful, though, it'll kill me, he's not saying, oh, if I'm bereaved, I'm bereaved. Who cares? No, he cares deeply. But also he accepts fate. And well, do you believe in fate, Paul? Somewhat, as you know. I believe in predestination. But also that God intervenes in the world. So predestination is what God has determined in a determinate way from the beginning what would happen. But the Lord also changes the course of the world by inserting his Son into it, by inserting his Holy Spirit into it, by interacting with us. And when God gave me the Holy Spirit and he set his power on me, that was not a natural part of the world. That wasn't something that was going to happen by just the world turning around and around and around and going around the sun. There's a lot of things that have happened in the world just because the world is here and it's just going and going and it's running like a clock. Just kind of things are happening. But once in a while, the Lord intervenes, and that can distort what we think is destiny. Because a lot of times people think, oh, it's fate, it's destiny. I was watching a movie with my kids not so long ago, and they had destiny. Destiny was something that someone would say, oh, it's your destiny, it's your destiny. Because, and it was funny because it was what another being had planned for them, not God. Like, it'd be like me raising a child to be a lawyer and telling them it's their destiny to become a lawyer. Well, because I say? That's an abuse of the idea. There's a lot, and that's why I see all the time is like people, like in movies and stuff, they're understanding of destiny that it's like this sort of like, it's like telling people that's what you should do. Like it's your destiny to be married. It's your destiny to get a job. It's like all this weird, which I don't think of that as destiny at all. Destiny is immutable. it's only something only really known to God and those to whom he reveals it. I mean, if he could reveal to us, like when he said, Peter, when you were young, you went where you wanted, you did what you wanted, but when you're old, they're going to lead you where you would not. And in thus manner, he was signifying with what manner of death he would glorify the Lord. So, it's a revelation of his destiny. But it is not, but that's because it is something God has set in motion. But God interferes with the world, and that what might have been destiny is changed by what God does. Now, that's not like, well, from the beginning, a lot of that is his intention. I don't really believe the world is out of control. It's only out of control from the human perspective because we don't control it. And we don't know what's happening. We can't conceive of all that's happening. There's just too much going on. But the system is not beyond the complexity of God. Certainly not. You look how big the universe is. The heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. The earth is just a humble place for God to put his feet. We think of it. I always think it's funny when people would show, like, from the 70s, the picture of Earth from Voyager, with just this little blue dot, right, is what it became, like among the stars, just this blue dot. And for some people, that was like an astonishing thing, like, oh, the Earth is so small and in the midst of the massive universe. And actually, well, you get the scale, you raise the scale high enough, sure, things will seem small. But the idea that the earth is this small thing is not like alien, and they act like that is somehow. I remember being annoyed at them showing this thing with Carl Sagan and, the little blue smudge, the fuzzy blue dot. And it sort of became like an anti-religion, like the earth is the center of the universe. That's what the Bible says. It's like, that doesn't, what at all it says. The earth is put in a very humble position. As far as when I read the scripture, the earth is not like this exalted place of like all things. The earth is my footstool. So they took the presents, they go down to Egypt, and they stand before Joseph again. And Joseph sees Benjamin among them. And when he sees that, he immediately prepares a feast before he talks to them. And so the man, I assume this is his servant, the ruler of his house, sure, his chief, the one who, again, it's interesting, like, like the servant who governs the house is called the ruler, which is a funny name for a slave. But again, like I said, is he a slave or is he a servant? Meaning he could take up service elsewhere. It's possible. Because especially if he's Egyptian, I don't know. I don't know what the rules were. A lot of times, if you were the ruler of the house of the second most powerful man in Egypt, the only job you'd want besides that is to be ruler of Pharaoh's house. So it's like there's really not a lot of upward mobility from that point. It's not a bad gig, is what I'm saying. And so he made ready, he says, slay and make ready, get the feast ready, kill something. Oh, sorry. Oh. And so the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. Because this was odd. They're like, they brought us into his house, and this was kind of disturbing. Too much hospitality. It throws them off a bit. It's like just a little too friendly. Before he was very hostile, and now they're in his house. They don't understand if this is an indication of further hostility. They're being, like I said, they've been brought into his house, and now they feel shut in. You know what I mean? They said he wants us under his power. He wants us in his house where he can have us arrested and imprisoned. He's going to fall on us and take us for bondmen in our asses. It's kind of interesting. That's kind of like what they thought to do to Joseph, isn't it? We'll fall on him and make him a bondman. No, that's not what they wanted, to kill him. But they're thinking and fearing for themselves. When I read that, I was like, in our asses. I was like, oh, he's going to throw our asses in jail. And they came near the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of his house. And so they're afraid of what's going to happen, and they haven't talked to Joseph yet. They thought, before we talk to him, let's talk to his steward and clear up this thing about the money. Right? We came down to buy food. And, oh, sir, we want to talk to you. And he's like, okay, what? We came down to buy food, and we came to the inn. We opened our sacks, and every man's money was in the mouth of his sack in full weight. And we brought it again. And the other money we brought down, we want to buy more grain. This is what we're here for. And the steward says, peace be unto you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father have given you treasure in your sacks. And that's kind of I don't know, that's kind of an interesting, sounds like a fib to me. It's like, because Joseph did it. I guess you could say Joseph was inspired. I think he's fibbing. He's lying just a bit here. And he's the servant of Joseph. That's all right. They're deceiving them. And it's an interesting, does Joseph do right or wrong in all this? A lot of times, like I said, I don't want to judge the patriarchs harshly. We understand more than the ancients because we can look back on their stories and see their mistakes. You know what I mean? It's like when you're in the midst of all this, it's not obvious. I mean, I've screwed up my life too, but in different ways. And that would not be necessarily obvious to me, but maybe to an outside observer, they'd look at it and say, oh, it's obvious what you're doing wrong, Paul. I had your money. And he brought Simeon out into them. Well, that's a lie. He didn't have his money. He put it in their sacks. But it also is the truth in that he's probably the one who put it in their sacks. So he had their money. And as giving it you could say, oh, it's kind of true, that it's a present from God and God has inspired this and all that. But that's not really what's going on. I don't really, I can't really condone that. So, and he brings Simeon out, and then they're reunited with their brother who's been captive. And I guess, I wonder how Joseph kept him there. I remember in the movie, Simeon was in prison yelling at, and I'm sorry I keep bringing up the movie. And I know it's not perfect. Like I said, I used to get annoyed at movies because they weren't exactly like the scriptures. But now I just look at it as like, I'm just pleased when they produce things that are at least in spirit faithful to it. You know what I mean? That don't pervert it by changing the basic elements of the story. For example, in the movie they had Joseph looking down and Simeon's like, my brothers will come for me. But they're coming. They won't leave me here, as he's down in the hole. And then the character of Joseph, you see on his face this expression that of course gives you a flashback to when he was in the hole. I don't think there was a flashback. You didn't need one because you knew the story of Joseph, that he had been thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. And they have him visiting Simeon and seeing him in his prison and saying, my brothers will come. They never came for Joseph. They never came for Joseph. And, again, that's not from the scriptures. Though one could imagine, right? That he's in prison there and like, well, does Joseph ever visit him? I mean, what are his feelings about that? Well, we don't know exactly. But one could imagine, So the steward brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water. They washed their feet. He gave their asses provender. Provender is, feed. It's just a fancy word for feed. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. Okay, what is that sentence sounds, I just can't make heads. That sentence sounds wrong to me. I don't know. Sounds like I'm missing something there. Let's see. Okay, be gracious unto thee, my son. Oh, that's too far. Okay, a little further back. What verse? Let me just fix this. Oh, sorry. Take note of the verse, Paul. 25. Oh, wait. Yeah. I want to just look at another translation. When Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in his hand. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. Okay, so what is that? Let's just, how about we use the NIV, the Devil's Own Translation, to get a little thought for thought on that one. I kid. Sort of. Where the world? Alphabetical listings. There we go. New International Version. Let's see what it says in verse 25. When Joseph came home, they presented the gifts they had brought into his house. When Joseph came home, that went wrong. When Joseph came home, that's wrong. They made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. Against Joseph's coming at noon, I think would be a better way to say that, maybe. The NIV is so often thought land that I can't really tell what part is, when Joseph came home, they don't even mention, there you go. They prepared the gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon because they had heard they were to eat there. Okay. I knew that against meant something like that, but it still seems like a bad translation. It is. I mean, the meaning is kind of obvious, right? Oh, wait, let me go back. There we go. All right. So, they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon. Against Joseph's coming. They knew Joseph was coming at noon, so they made ready the present. For they had heard they should eat bread there. Again. And when Joseph came home and they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, bowed themselves to the earth, they bow again, reinforcing that dream. And he asked them of their welfare and said, "Is your father well, the old man? Is he yet alive?" Right? He lifted up his eyes and he looked at Benjamin, his mother's son. He says, "God be gracious to you, my son." Notice the call for God's grace. It's throughout the Old Testament. The idea that God had to be kind. Now, like I said, I don't know if this is the same as charis in the New Testament. There is a similar word. Like I said, mercy is a little more, like I said, we talked about last time or a couple times ago, how in a certain context, grace can mean like being graceful. It can mean elegance. We have that in English too. And in Hebrew, there's a word that is often translated grace, but means elegant. But I don't think that's what this is. The Lord be gracious to you. Oh, that's mouth. Hold on. Gotta sink down to verse something or other. Am I in verse 43? Okay, good. God be gracious. The word gracious is chanan, to show favor, to be gracious. Okay, it's more of the true sense of favor, to favor someone. Now, it doesn't have the explicit idea under charis in the New Testament, the idea of grace there, of unmerited favor. That's why I say mercy, because mercy implies you're guilty. People who are guilty need mercy. The innocent don't need mercy, technically. Though the cruel who punish the just, when someone cruel punishes someone who is just, that's a kind of a mercilessness that goes really beyond what we talk about when we talk about mercy. Because mercy implies, like I said, that there is some sort of real transgression that needs to be thing. If someone is evil and they apply, torture to someone without mercy, that's just evil. The person who is, if they're truly just, they don't need mercy. You know what I mean? Though they could be victim, and you could say, well, it needs to be shown, like Jesus on the cross. Right? He didn't deserve to be there, but it would be technically merciful to not crucify him, right? On a certain sense, but not in the sense that we usually think of the word. Because like I said, it implies guilt. It implies you need something. It's not, judicially, declared innocent. You don't need grace for that. If you're innocent, you're innocent. You don't need grace for it. Grace is for the guilty. But because, like I said, and the unworthy, let's put it that way. Unworthy might be a good way to say it, because you don't necessarily have to even be a transgressor. You could just be unworthy. Not having earned positively. It's one thing to say, well, I haven't earned this negativity. That's how people think about hell. That's why the problem of hell is such a negative on the Christian scene, is because it totally caricaturizes the punishment side of things to where people have trouble believing they deserve it. You know what I mean? I think I know I'm a sinner. I should suffer for my sins. The Lord knows this. But if I can't acknowledge that, I need to be able to acknowledge that. And oftentimes people, they don't want to acknowledge their sins, or again, what was it? I had a specific tack on that. Well, just that there's the positive and the negative side of it, right? You could be not worthy of punishment or not worthy of blessing. You know what I mean? So the point is, Benjamin could be perfectly innocent, let's just say, no sin. Still, he needs God. You can still say, God be gracious to you. Because even though you have offended in nothing, there are many ways in which we have not positively earned any of the blessings God could give us. Like Abraham believed God and it was imputed to him for righteousness. That's a good deal. That's a really, really good deal. That for just believing I get imputed righteousness to me. You think about it. How cheaply could I buy this? Could I buy it any cheaper? So it's such a travesty to miss out on it because it's a free gift. This thing that God has given and done for us through his son. It's a free gift. So God is gracious to me, not just to relieve me of my guilt, but of having done wrong, but the guilt of not having done right. The guilt of not having done as much good as I could. Like Jacob was blessed in all the things he did, right? That's God being gracious to him, not in preventing him from being punished, though he could have, that is there too, right? He could suffer for his sins, but he's being gracious not only to relieve us from punishment, but also to bless us. And so that's how he would say to his brother, the Lord be gracious to you. He's not thinking about sin so much as he's thinking about, God be gracious to you and bless you beyond the measure you are worthy of. And there's nothing greater we could ask for. Because we aren't worthy. And so that's the basis on which we need God to deal with us. We need him to deal with us on the basis of, I'm going to be gracious to you. Because if he does it on the basis of, I'm going to be fair with you, it ain't going to go well. But I do think the idea of eternal torture really messes with people's heads because they can't imagine themselves worthy of it. You're right. I can't either. I think about the worst moments I've had, or the things that haunt me in my dreams and stuff. Things that haven't happened that were close to that. I got run over by a car once, and I have not constant, but like occasional nightmares about being trapped underneath a car with the burning engine on my face, or just trapped under a burning engine, right? And that's not much different than what hell is supposed to be like. We're all confined and burned and stuff. That's pretty awful. I don't believe in eternal torment. I believe it's just a metaphor. It's just a spiritual state that is addressing the second death. The second death is the reality. Now you can say, oh, well, no, actually, I think eternal torment is the reality. And the second death is symbolic. It is just a spiritual thing. But here's the thing you got to know. You've done that arbitrarily. You've done that arbitrarily. You've not, and many people do that without even considering. They just receive it from the pastor. The pastor says, death is symbolic, torture is real. I have trouble conceiving that. I can easily conceive myself worthy of death and almost long for it. The quiet of the grave. I could almost long for it. But the problem with the eternal torment is it makes people think like, well, I'm not worthy. It just renders the whole thing ridiculous in the mind of so many, because you posit such a ridiculous overcompensation for the evil done. Oh yeah, you're going to burn forever and ever in torture. And I do think that hell is reserved for the wicked, of course. But like I said, I think the nature of the final punishment is not as they say. And like I said, you can't, like I have said, you cannot just take one scripture and build your whole castle out of that. You have to build it out of the preponderance of evidence of all the scriptures. Because God spake not only by Jesus, but by his apostles. And not only by his apostles, but by his prophets. And not only by his prophets, but by Moses and the psalmists. And there's a lot to answer for. The same Spirit by all, working one thing, working one truth. So when he speaks to Joseph, he kind of hastens and gets out of there. He's like, I got to get out of here. For his bowels did yearn upon his brother. Bowels did yearn. I wonder what that... I mean, it's probably his bowels did yearn, precisely, or something very close. Bowels. Racham. It means bowels, but it also means compassion. But I think compassion is not the right word here, is it? Bowels. Racham. They say it means compassion. That's not Strong's definition, by the way. They keep doing that. Strong's Concordance definition, the proper one, this is what it looks like. This is such a total... Sometimes this annoys me that this makes it look like this is the Strong's Concordance. No. I mean, in the Strong's Concordance, you would only find this. You will not find this part of speech part and that part of absolute plural intensive. You will find a transliteration, the phonetic spelling. You may not see the transliteration, actually. No, you wouldn't. You would just see the phonetic spelling and a definition, but look, it doesn't match the definition given down here. Compassion in the plural, by extension, the womb as cherishing the fetus, by implication, a maiden. But it comes from the word raham, which means to love, have compassion, but derivative from I'm going to go there. It's, again, a primitive root to fondle, by implication, to love, especially compassionate. It's interesting that it's translated bowels, because it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for the other places where it's translated bowels. Let's see. Because I remember saying, if there be any bowels of compassion, that's a New Testament, though. I think compassion, as we use it in English, may not be the best word. I just like the word passion, honestly. His bowels, as it says, let's go back to the text. His bowels did yearn. His passion. I don't know why they translated bowels. There is a word that is bowels, I believe, and it means literally like the feelings or something like that. At least I thought there was. Maybe my brain is like just not remembering properly. This is Kamar again. To grow warm and tender. I love that. Bible Hub, seriously. I don't know why. It's just like, is this really the kind of ads we need on Bible Hub? It's like, thanks for all the ladies' legs and whatever. It's not really what I was hoping for. It's just like, oh, thanks. I guess whatever. It's Google ads. Or whatever ads they got. I don't know. Joseph made haste, and for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. Yearn. We looked that up, and it was what? I got distracted by the legs. To grow warm and tender, to be or grow hot. The warmth. He had a feeling of warmth for his brother. For his warm feelings for his brother, actually. Compassion, I like the idea of feelings. The bowels are put there because often the bowels are associated with feelings. And if you don't know this from just living in a body, then I don't know what kind of living you've been doing. You've never had your bowels upset by your thoughts? And in fact, I was recently listening to a physician talk about it. And he said, you have more nerve endings in your bowels than you do in your brain. And they were saying it's like a second brain. Now, I don't know about that. I have a lot of skepticism about well, I'll tell you what. I have total skepticism about everything I ever learned, especially from school, and especially about a lot of things with science. Because science is a project. It's something that's on the move. And when I was young, when I learned about the brain and the body, a lot of that stuff has changed. They've learned a lot more about the human body and brain than they knew 40 years ago. And we know that things like the heart and the bowels are much, they used to mock the scriptures. They think you can throw your bowels. It's like, one, it would be really weird if the Bible didn't use the speech of the people to whom it was written. I mean, if it was written in a way that was like, had no idioms, no figures of speech. I guess for some people that would be almost preferable, right? Why would God use human idioms? Why would God use figures of speech? Would he not speak in plain language? Is it not said? Except we speak with the mouth words that are easy to understand. How shall anyone know when to say amen? Right? And so again, it can be confusing in the sense because we're so far removed that we don't understand some figures of speech. Or we begin to mock them because we don't understand what brought them to pass. So people are like, oh, bowels can't think. Bowels don't feel. Well, they do, and more than you realize. I'll just say that. I don't know the extent to which that's actually any kind of cognition goes down in the bowels. I'm not saying that. But there's a lot of signals, and it can affect you. Meaning, if you've got all those nerve endings in your bowels, it's obviously sending messages to your brain. Yeah, I mean, why else would you have nerve endings there? Why not just be without feeling in those places where you don't need feeling? For signals to be sent. I don't know. Like I said, because some of the claims being made now I consider fantastical, but I also listen to them with interest because knowing that we are growing in our understanding, if nothing else. Even if it's growing in the wrong direction or slowly or 2 steps forward and 1 step back, as it often is, it's still growth. So he sought where to weep. He had to find a place to cry. Just because the feelings he had towards his brother when his brother was there, his true brother. His other 10 brothers, he'd spent 20 years remembering the awful thing they did to him. And they sold him into slavery. Now, ultimately, he's going to say, well, what you purpose for evil, the Lord purposed for good. And it goes back to what the Apostle Paul said, that all things work together for good for those that love God, for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, again, that purpose included some time in prison, a long time. He's still technically a slave. You know what I mean? A very highly valued slave. It's never exact. Like, he can't just leave Egypt. He serves Pharaoh. I think that's pretty much permanent. He's got a new name, Ashnath Paneah. You know what I mean? They gave him a what? They married it. You're here. You're part of us now. They adopted him into Egypt. So he goes and he's weeping, he washes his face. Good thing to do if you've been crying, wash your face. Hide the tears. He goes out and he composes himself and does not, regains his emotions and says, set on bread. Bring out the food. Bread is often put for food. Just like we use bread for meaning money or dough, right? Dough. Give me some dough. Give me some bread. Well, also bread in their world meant all food. So set bread meant like, hey, bring some bread out. If you just brought a loaf, we would think probably like, okay, you want a loaf of bread? No, they mean like bring out the meal. The whole meal. So they set on for him by himself and for them by themselves. Meaning they had their own table and he had his own, they ate in one spot, he ate in another. I don't know if it's a table because, again, our modern conceptions, they may have been eating on the ground. I don't know how the Egyptians set up dining. I have really no idea. But they had a place to eat. They're probably sitting on the ground with like a low table, I guess. That's how I always imagine it in the East. Right? He set on for himself. He set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves. I don't know if the Egyptians ate separately from Joseph himself, if they regarded him as a Hebrew. So I don't know if they're talking about three places. It does sound a little bit like three places, right? Because it's him by himself, them by themselves, and the Egyptians, which should eat with him by themselves. They may eat with him just like the Hebrews are eating with him. I mean, the Hebrews are eating with him, but not in the same, not in the same little cluster of people. Just like the kids' table at Thanksgiving, if you have that sort of arrangement. The kids go over here and then the adults over here, right? Oh, because kids can be kind of unpleasant at the table. Hey, who would have guessed? Okay. So either they were eating with Joseph or separate from Joseph, but it doesn't matter for the prime purpose of what we would talk about here, which is the Egyptians don't eat with Hebrews. This is an abomination. This reminds me back when Jesus speaks to the woman at the well. How art thou, being a Jew, speaking to me, who is a Samaritan? The Egyptians, as the Jews later in their religion had, they did not eat with certain people. They were, and even in the New Testament it says, with such an one, so do not eat. Speaking of brothers who, with such an one, well, if any brother be called a fornicator or a drunkard or etc. I forgot what the other thing. I know fornicator, drunkard, adulterer was probably in there, or could be in there, murderer. I don't know, maybe not murder, but murder is not quite the same. Because generally when you're a murderer, you don't stay free. And it's not usually like this thing that's like this, like a drunkard is drunk all the time. I mean, there's no like time off from being a drunkard. But for murder, usually murder comes in, apart from serial killers, murders are usually one-offs, right? Usually. The great majority of murders are single, right? We talk about mass murders, mass shootings and stuff, but really when you consider all the murder that goes on, it's actually a very small portion of murder in general. So while someone could be a habitual drunk, a habitual liar, a habitual fornicator, it's really hard to be a habitual murderer. And it sort of goes without saying that you shouldn't keep company with such people. You know what I mean? You shouldn't keep company with the fornicators. And Paul said, yet not altogether with the fornicators of the world. See, for Christians, it's different. If the Christians were the Egyptians, they wouldn't sit with the one of them who had transgressed beyond a certain point and refused to repent. Whereas the Jews, whereas the Egyptians they sit with the Egyptians. They just won't sit with foreigners, especially Hebrews. Hebrews having very different customs. Like I said, that it was customary for the Hebrews to wear beards. And in fact, I don't know about the Hebrews before Abraham, but we always presume and show them with beards on. I don't remember if it spoke of beards, but we do know that in the Israeli law, under Moses, you were not allowed to round the corner of your beard. Now, I don't know, and that was taken as grow your beard out and don't trim it. And Bullinger was saying so as to make a tuft of hair like because oftentimes like goatees and other kind of, you can do all kinds of weird things with just like getting tattoos on your skin, which are also forbidden in the Old Testament. No tattoos. You shall not make cuttings in yourself. You shall not round a corner of your beard. It was all part of showing them a special people. But in the Egyptians, very similarly, they were thought of them as special, and they were all clean-shaven and washed. And the Hebrews were dirty and bearded from their perspective, is what I think. So eating with them why is it an abomination? Is it just because it's not like we just hate those people. Or they're disgusting, we don't want to come near them. It's just like with the Jews. It's not that they so much hate those people, though it can come off that way. It can be perceived as hatred. I'm over an hour? I almost can't believe I didn't get through this chapter, and I'm over an hour. I looked down. A minute ago it was 20 minutes. Now I'm an hour and 10 minutes. Well, we got to finish a little bit more. I thought we would be done. Well, we're at the end of the chapter. Okay, good. I guess we won't be doing chapter 44 like I thought. I can't believe we're 10 minutes over. That's just astonishing. But just to finish the thought. The main problem with the eating with people is it would cause you to be ceremonially defiled. The Jews did not want to be defiled because then they could not go to temple. They could not do certain things. They would have to go through all this ceremonial cleansing before they could re-enter the Hebrew sacred life. And so I'm assuming the Egyptians have the same thing. If they eat with the Hebrews, they won't be able to go to the temple. They won't be able to do the things that they do as Egyptians because they're going to have to go be cleansed. They're going to have to go down to the Nile and have the priests speak incantations over them because they came into contact. And I'm making this up partially, just because I don't know exactly what the protocols were, but I'm assuming it's something similar. That's why the Hebrews, same thing. They were an abomination to them, and it wasn't forbidden. Oh, don't go near Gentiles, or don't shake hands with them, or don't dine with them. That's not it at all. That was not part of the law. It was just that they knew that if they came into contact with a heathen, with a Gentile, that they might be defiled, unknowingly even. Or there might be something in the meal that would defile. There's a lot of ways they could get defiled. And I do think it was actually more common to have Gentiles. They generally just didn't eat with the Gentiles. One, because the Gentiles' food was unclean. And two, if you brought them in to eat with you, you never knew what kind of uncleanness you might pick up and become thereby defiled. Oh, well. He gave Benjamin a mess 5 times as big, to show his favor. And also, he sat before them the firstborn according to... He set them down in order of how they were. And the youngest, he gave this 5 times as big. Imagine getting a plate of food, but it's 5 times the normal amount. That's not just a double blessing. He gives him 5 as the number of grace. I don't know why, but it always comes up like that. But he said, the Lord be gracious to you. And he himself is generous and gracious to his brother. Okay, we got to conclude here. We have no time left. We'll continue tomorrow in Genesis 44. Sorry, we even read that. I guess that was unnecessary. But I kind of feel like it was part of it. If we don't have the whole story, sometimes it feels a little weird to analyze it, or at least get enough ahead to get context. So I definitely don't regret it. All right, till next time. Thanks for joining me, and we'll be back again tomorrow.
Woe to the multitude of many people, which make a noise like the noise of the sea and the rushing of nations, that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but God shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, like a wheel before the whirlwind. And behold, eventide